Matthew was out at a meeting for work, which his wife expected to have gone on for a few hours more, but the meeting ended a few hours early, which afforded Matthew to drive home a few hours earlier. Matthew knew that his wife Susan was a bit distant lately, and he expected she was cheating, but what he would see when he got home made him feel so angry he felt like going into the bedroom and killing his wife and lover. But he knew he had to wait for the right time. He felt his blood boil when he saw his wife in bed with another man. Matthew set up hidden cameras around his house and used to monitor them from his office at work. The cameras only went on when there was movement, to avoid him from having to trawl through tons of footage. One night he saw his wife and lover talking in the bedroom, and they were organising to drive out to a really beautiful spot he knew. When he heard the conversation, all of a sudden the spot he knew brought a whole new beautiful meaning to him, because he knew exactly what he would do. The next night Susan was driving in her car with her lover. She smiled, saying to him, "This is such a beautiful spot. I used to come here with my husband. The view is so beautiful. It's just down the road." Jack, her lover, said, "If it's just down the road, why don't we just walk?" She smiled back and said, "Because I always use the car to get here, because you can have a lot of fun in the car, if you know what I mean." With that, Susan got an awful fright, as she realised she could not slow the car down. Herself and Jack screamed as the car went faster and faster towards the edge of the cliff. Matthew was driving behind, smiling to himself as he saw the car drive right off the cliff. He parked the car and smiled. Susan said to Jack, "Jump out of the car. Jump, quick now." They both jumped before the car went off the cliff. Susan walked up behind her husband, who wanted to have killed her, and was smiling, thinking he did kill her, and she hit him with a rock, knocking him off the edge of the cliff to his death. Susan knew that she had to put on an act of the grieving wife. Poor Susan, her husband, drove off a cliff in an awful tragic accident and perished to his death. All the while Susan thought about this and the act of the grieving wife, she smiled, and then she hugged and kissed her lover. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. Sam was 10 years old and loved cats. A few years ago, unfortunately, the only cat he had was ran over by a car on the road outside his house. He was heartbroken as he had no friends and felt like the only one who understood him was his cat. He spent days and nights in bed upset about his cat getting killed. One day he was walking in the woods when he came across a woman dressed like a witch, standing in front of a cauldron. He wondered why she was dressed like a witch when it wasn't even Halloween for another few months. Then he got a start wondering, was she actually really a witch, especially when she had a cauldron in front of her? He made up his mind. Of course she had to be a real witch. The witch said to him, "Now there, dear boy, there seems to be something troubling you. What is it, may I ask?" The boy frowned, then said, "It's my cat, my poor cat Snowy. He got ran over by a car outside my house." The witch smiled, and this troubled Sam. Why would she smile after he just told her his poor cat got run over by a car? Then she said, "My dear boy, it is very sad news indeed that your cat got killed, but I have some good news for you. I have a very special cat that does all sorts of tricks. This cat can perform better tricks than any other cat you might see in any circus, and the best news is, my dear boy, that you can have my cat and give him the name you choose, but you can only have him under one condition, and one condition only, and that is, do not ever, and I mean never, ever make money from him. Do not ever take any money for anything you do with that cat. Don't accept any offer from anyone. If you abide by that rule, the cat is all yours, but if you don't, well, just put it this way, my dear boy. I warned you." The boy was scared of the witch and just stared at her with fear for what felt like an hour, but was only minutes. Then he finally said, "I would really love to have your cat, lady. I promise I won't ever take any money from anyone for anything to do with your cat." The witch smiled and said, "Well then, my dear boy, the cat is all yours." Suddenly a black cat came out from behind the cauldron and walked up to Sam. Sam was so happy to have a cat again and wondered what tricks he did exactly. As the months went on, he found out more and more. Word got around town of the cat having amazing skills in so many different areas. It was known to be able to jump at unexplainable heights and so much more. Videos of the cat started going viral, but Sam stuck to his word and didn't earn any money from his cat. He turned down countless offers. One man in particular was a multi-millionaire with a huge empire made up of cat clothes, food, events, and so much more around cats. The man was called Harry Dean. He made the boy an offer of $5 million for his cat. Sam declined. On the day the man gave the cat his most expensive cat food, that cats absolutely adored the world over, but the cat wouldn't touch it. He practically turned his nose up to it. He went up to the boy instead and started eating his cheapest cat food he could afford from the local mall. Sam's parents couldn't understand why Sam believed the crazy old woman in the woods, pretending to be a witch. They kept trying to get him to make money from the cat. They could see the fortune they were turning down over some stupid idea of a woman thinking she was a witch. One day Sam's parents tricked him into making money from the cat. They promised him when he was going on the news talking about him, they wouldn't be paid anything, but of course they were paid a fine sum. They would give him some extra pocket money to lessen any guilt they might have. They wouldn't tell him where the money came from, of course. Sam was on the news talking about his cat. "Hi, my name is Sam, and I had a very nice cat a few years ago, and his name was Snowy. Snowy was a very curious cat and used to always wander out onto the road. That is what killed him in the end. A car ran him over and they didn't even stop to say sorry. He was just lying there on the road dead. I was upset for weeks and weeks. Then one day I was walking in the woods and I met a lady. She was dressed as a witch. First I thought she wasn't a witch because it isn't every day you see a witch. But I know now that it was definitely a real witch, because how else would my cat Miley know how to do all these wonderful, amazing tricks? My mom and dad tell me I'm silly for believing that woman was a witch, but I know what I saw, and I know that woman was a witch. The next day Sam was delighted to have gotten extra pocket money. He was playing with his cat Miley. His mom walked in the room and screamed when she saw the cat's eyes on the floor. She wondered why Sam hadn't screamed. until she knew the reason. When she got closer, the cat's eyes were intact. It was Sam's eyes were scrawled out of his sockets from the witch's cat. We have very tragic breaking news today that 10-year-old Sam Wilson was tragically murdered last night. It is believed that his parents are in custody and are about to be charged with the murder of the boy. The boy was just sitting on the chair over there speaking to me yesterday about how his parents wouldn't believe him about his story of getting a cat from a witch. The boy was convinced that he did have a witch's cat, and this story is unfolding as we speak, so we will keep you updated with information as soon as we get it. Our thoughts and prayers are with the young boy who has tragically lost his life to such a brutal and senseless act of violence. For watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. It was Halloween night and everyone was having so much fun. Tony and his kids started the day early, shopping for Halloween, and really enjoyed it, since it was his favourite time of the year. He then went trick-or-treating with his kids, and it reminded him of his own childhood and the excitement and fun of trick-or-treating. They ended the night in his grandfather's house. His grandfather was throwing a Halloween party, and most of the family were there. They were in the hallway of a huge house he inherited from his father, and he was telling a ghost story. He said, "The vase here next to me was passed down from generation to generation, and it contains the ashes of a pirate who was our great-great-great-grandfather. Legend has it that if this vase is broken by any of our generation, then it will bring bad luck to anyone involved with that person." Tony laughed and he said, "We are all here tonight, so that would mean we would be all doomed." Later that night, Tony's eldest son walked into the living room and said, "Hey, I am not being smart, and I didn't do it on purpose. As a matter of fact, I didn't do it at all, and I'm not getting the blame. But remember that story about if any of our generation broke the vase, it will bring us bad luck? Well, our youngest of our generation just knocked it over and broke it by accident." Simon, who was only 6, had a scared look on his face. He didn't even see the vase. He didn't even hear the ghost story until his older brother told him about it. Tony's grandfather went crazy, but tried to calm down after a while. That night when they finally got to sleep, Simon had a nightmare, and he told Tony that he dreamt of the pirate. He dreamt he saw him at the bottom of his bed. Tony said, "Don't listen to his great-grandfather's silly ghost stories. They're not real." As Tony turned around, he froze in horror when he saw floating in the air a pirate. Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content. It all happened on a Thursday night. I was trying my best to fall asleep, but found it so hard as I was so excited to enter a piano competition the next night. Eventually I did fall asleep, and the most amazing thing happened. I dreamt of playing the most beautiful song on a piano on the stage of the competition, and it was the most amazing, beautiful dream ever. The most amazing thing was, when I woke up, I knew the song I dreamt of, exactly note for note, and practiced it as soon as I could in my living room. That night I played it in the competition, and just as I hoped, the crowd loved it. And I even won the first place prize. I was over the moon. It was that night when I went to sleep. I had the worst nightmare, with that song in the background. I was in a graveyard, dead in the piano, and there was so much horrific stuff around me. It was like I was looking at myself dead, and the dream went on and on every night. I hate going to sleep now because of having that recurring dream, that recurring nightmare, every single night. I wish I never ever dreamt of that damn song and played it on that damn piano, because it was when I played it, I brought some evil to life. I can feel it. Watching the Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content.
On September 16th, 1992, at approximately 3:45 p.m., 8-year-old Katie Laring left the Becker residence at 265 Harper's Way. She was on her bike, described by her mother as pink with white and purple stickers on it. According to Erica Becker, her piano teacher, with whom Katie had been most of the afternoon, Katie rode south in the direction of her home directly after leaving the house. The search began at 7 p.m. with police and volunteers scouring the woods which surrounded the Laring property. Katie's parents were too distraught to join the search party the first day, but were insistent on taking part for the following 3 days and nights. On the fourth day, Mr. Laring did not join his wife. He spent the night at a bar just outside of town, coming home only to pack his bags. He left without conversation, simply telling his wife he couldn't live there anymore and had nothing to offer but his grief. Though the police suspected him, his wife never did. Mr. Laring left against the advice of his lawyer. His body was found only 2 days later, a few miles west. He had died of an opioid overdose and was found in his car. 2 weeks after the disappearance, Mrs. Laring saw her daughter sitting on the living room couch. She'd been woken by a sudden nausea and was headed to the bathroom. The girl, who was barely visible in the dark, did not respond to her mother's calls. Mrs. Laring claims she believed this to be her daughter's ghost. There was nothing of life in her at all, she would later tell police. Yet she knew it was Katie, and so she approached, an arm out ahead, dreading the moment when the phantom would vanish. Before reaching out, she noted the girl's size. She seemed to be twice as big as Katie, and yet Mrs. Laring recognized her. To her astonishment, when her hand reached the girl, it was not shadow or cold air she felt on her palm, but flesh. It was not a ghost, but Katie's decomposing corpse that sat upright, mouth agape, in the living room now. The nausea she felt had been due to the smell. It would take her another 2 days to call the police. I couldn't let them take her away again, she would later recount to the local newspaper. The rumors started soon after. At first, everyone was sorry for her. Such a cruel thing for the killer to do, to bring her own dead daughter's body back in such a state. But concern turned to fear when some began to question whether that was what happened. Maybe she had found her daughter's body in a shallow grave in the woods and dug it up herself. Or still, some pondered if maybe she was the one who killed her in the first place. The police never charged her or anyone else with the girl's death or the body's desecration. There wasn't enough evidence for either. The autopsy concluded the girl died of a cardiac arrest, but the body was too deteriorated for further analysis. It wasn't long before the town turned on the mother, shunning her from society entirely. For months, no one spoke to her. The only contact she had was with the mailman, who couldn't help but stay and chat when she would make conversation. She was desperate to connect, he claimed when speaking to reporters. He continued, "For what it's worth, I never felt anything dark from her. If I had any thought that she'd killed her daughter, I wouldn't have felt a single ounce of pity for the woman." "4 months later, Mrs. Trumbo passed away in her sleep. She was 89 and had been ill for some time. The funeral went as expected, friends and family, hushed conversations. 14 days later, her body was found sitting at the kitchen table of her daughter's home. She had been embalmed and was much better preserved than Katie Laring. Her daughter, who had found her, had no answers for the police. She moved out of town less than a month later. The townspeople's fear of Mrs. Laring became a general fear, which infected every part of daily life, and was the talk of almost all conversations with no assailant or perpetrator to point to. There had been no desecration of the gravesite. Investigators had to exhume the coffin. It was shut, the inside clean. No marks or scratches on the wood. There were no signs that there had ever been a body inside. Some even went on to call the burial a hoax. To those who had not been at the cemetery, believing this was a comfort. But for the ones who had attended, there was no such relief. They watched the body lowered into the earth with their own eyes. For them, there was no explanation. The investigators checked the funeral home for signs of foul play, but even then they admitted it would only serve as evidence of Mrs. Trumbo's case, not Katie Laring's. Regardless, no such evidence was found. When a third death was announced in the town paper, the entire town was on pins and needles. The funeral was sparsely attended, with all eyes glancing at the body for signs of movement. The wife of the deceased, a Mrs. Henry, insisted on being present as the casket was closed, and every inch of the way from the funeral home to its final resting place at McKinley Cemetery. She was at her husband's side the entire time, and when asked by a local reporter how she felt, she told him she was confident nothing strange would happen, explaining that after the body was lowered into the grave, she had paid a construction company to pour cement over the coffin. She even joked that she would have simply cremated him if he had not hated the idea while he was alive. Demand for cremations rose over 200% in the following months. Mrs. Henry's precautions seemed to have worked, but none of the town's residents seemed willing to risk it. 9 months after Mr. Henry's burial, just as the stories were becoming a memory, Mrs. Henry woke to find her husband's remains lying beside her in bed. Investigators concluded he had been lying there for at least 6 hours before he was discovered. The concrete grave remained untouched. The exhumation, which took 2 days, revealed an intact coffin, same as the previous cases. With no leads to follow, the 2 detectives assigned to the case went back to Mrs. Laring, who refused to speak to them, stating that when she was grieving most, the police had only treated her as a suspect. As they were leaving the property, she reminded them that there was no evidence a human being had killed her daughter. When they asked what she believed it had been that took her, she said she had no earthly idea what it was, but she knew where it lived. In the woods, she said, pointing to the trees surrounding her backyard. She told them she heard it every night since she had found her daughter's corpse, laughing. Every night, save for when the bodies of the dead were discovered in their homes. Those nights, she told the detectives, were the only times there was no laughing behind the trees.
Thanks for watching The Assassin Rapper, and if you want to stay up to date on new content, then please subscribe and be sure to hit the bell to be notified on new content.